Yes, indeed. Once again, we're touching down in fine style with another edition of Department S. And as a matter of fact, this is the second installment of an ongoing investigation. And let it be said right at the very outset, this is not for everyone. Now let's say that again. This is not for everyone. You see, some people have been struck by the level of contradiction in the world, having been struck to such a degree that parts of them refuse to engage, refuse to take part in what it is they see as contradiction, have actually stopped in a sense of not wanting to be part of, for a preference for something that they may not be able to make a purchase upon, make a grasp of, make a connection to, but certainly they know it's out there and they may have had a glimpse of it in some way, some shape, some form, some fashion of inner essence engagement. So do see, when it's said that this is not for everyone, it's because not everyone is for what is available for some who would seek to valiant be, to have the courage to look with earnest, to look with sincerity, to look with genuineness upon oneself and see and know that something needs to be withered away, which is arbitrarily referred to as the devil. Thus, there is a conflict of interests. As a matter of fact, there is an unseen conflict of interest, the aspects of which are about to unfold. But let it be said, this is not for everyone, for everyone is not for it. So to begin then, and by the way, you're listening to the sounds of Department S at your service. A quick recap of last week's episode will reveal the following revelation captured between an interviewer and what is being presented as the devil.
Here begins the interview with the devil. I have uncovered the secret code by which I can pick up your thoughts. I have come to ask you some very plain questions. I demand that you give me direct and truthful answers. Are you ready for the interview, Mr. Devil?
Now, some may recall that it's very clear, at least to the inquiring mind and those that are seeking to really understand in an integrated or principled way. Well, of course, one is going to immediately realize that the interviewer and the so-called devil are one, because the conversation is taking place within the mind of the person conducting the interview. Where if we are to assume, until given a reason to not assume but to know, but if we are to assume when referring to the devil, one is referring to that which is fundamentally evil, then immediately the principled mind will suggest that there must be 7 domains of this expression, starting with the cause, the absolute cause, or better still, more succinctly, that is to say, the government, the order, and the dominion upon human life experience. Now let's say that again. If we are to presuppose that the reference to the devil is speaking about the lowest part of a spectrum, that is to say, the 7th expression, the 7th domain, and then subsequently the highest expression of this chord is going to be the 1st domain, and that the 1st domain is arbitrarily referred to as the government, the order, and the dominion upon human life experience. It governs, it orders, and we find ourselves within the dominion of something that maintains and gives allowance to human life experience. For without it, human life experience could not exist. It is the government and the order and the dominion upon human life experience, which by degrees becomes less and less to do with the absolute government, order and dominion, and more to do with the expression of it, in the same way that when a person throws a rock into a still body of water, there are 7 rings that emanate out from the shock of this rock hitting the water, in which the first ring, the first enveloped resonation, is actually directly connected to God, if God is the rock that caused the 7 rings. Whereas the final ring, the 7th ring, is not good or bad, but simply the end result, the final resonation, the 7th echo of something that originated with the rock. And so it's therefore furthest away from God, the government, order and dominion that caused the very resonation of the 7 rings of definition. You see? So, simply put, if God was the cause that transmitted itself into creation, which was the body of water, then the rings are what has been created. The cause, the creator, the body of water, and creation, the 7 rings that ensued. Now, when one understands life in this way and realizes that this principle can be applied to absolutely everything, one realizes that it's quite natural for the spark of generation to give rise to degeneration. If one looks at food, one can see that it's quite natural for the body to be caused to take in some food and then subsequently eject or expend that which is not useful or cannot be used anymore. And this then is the expendable expression of a natural process beginning with the cause, moving into the creator, and then of course the subsequent creation, which in itself has 7 expressions. We'll see that at this point, those that have been plugged in and are enjoying their work within the realms of reality, and principled reality at that, are going to understand in a fluent way the abstract notions that are being presented. But for some people it's no longer abstract, now it's real experienced life. Because some people are beginning to feel the nuances of what is causing them to feel uncomfortable about the way things are. And these nuances create a knowing above and beyond the intellectual pursuit of reference that one finds in university. This is educating the intuition, whereby the intuition responds with personal revelation. So, returning now to episode 2, realize when speaking about the devil, and given the indication that the devil is something that takes place in the mind, it is speaking about the natural expenditure of the mind. But bear in mind, the mind is designed to be regenerative, it's designed to refine. And so the definitive end result of the mind's expenditure is going to appear to be something quite high when compared to an inveigled life that does not or cannot tell the difference between fine and coarse. That is to say, some lives have no value, have no sense of value for one experience geared to the other. Now, if it comes to food, some people do. Some people say, well, that's junk food and that's organic food. That food is dead and these types of food are alive. Probiotic, I think it's called. They're alive. You actually put them into your body and they continue to work on your behalf. So this is quite high. But there's other food, upon being eaten over and over again, takes away from the vitality and the alacrity, not of the body, but of the mind. One wonders, inquiring minds around the world are probably asking themselves, what exactly does it mean to eat brain food? But is there even mind food out there, or mentality food, for that matter? But as this is not for everyone, the question is rhetorical, isn't it, really? But see that it must be really understood how the first premise of this fictitious engagement between questioner and the devil, the thing that must be really understood is the whole process is taking place within the mind, and furthermore, the mind is naturally split into custodial, maintaining, and expendable, in which the expendable is the least important quota, or the least important part of the equation. Doesn't mean that it's not important, but it means that it's expendable and so has a place, but not the most important place in the list of priorities. For one can tell how important something is by the length of time one can do without it. And what this then suggests is, a person that endeavors to rise above the lunar expression of their mind will immediately be free of contradiction, because contradiction appears in the lunar or expendable part of the equation. It is that separating out into two distinct polarities by way of natural process. And the reason why the human being would endeavor to remain separate from such a predisposition is because the human is designed to reconcile contradiction, to bring apparent opposites together and have them yield to the superiority of principled thinking, meditation, contemplation, life realization. The principle in one's life then governs the life, where in that sense contradiction recedes, as one would valiant be and face some difficult or perhaps uncomfortable situations in order to reconcile by truth, to see very clearly what these apparent opposites may be and bring them together by rising above the predisposition that comes from externally justifying bad attitude personification that leads a person further and further and further away from what it is they may have been blueprint destined to do. Contradiction then stands in the way of reconciling or the solving of one's life. Contradiction. And this has been mentioned and talked about before, but it's important to have that in the prophylactic of one's mind so that the contradiction in what is to follow immediately appears. That's the reason why we're taking the amount of time in the early stages to set the scene of what exactly a so-called devilish situation might be. It's taking place within the mind of a person. What must that say about the psychology of the person, the emotion of the person, the preponderances and traits and magnetic qualities of the person that will usurp or worse still possess the ability for the person to have a wide range of options leading to a objective point of view, a well-referenced objective point of view. Now, apart from the obvious that appears within the first proposition covered in the previous episode, And by the way, if there are those that are listening to episode 2 who think they're smart and that they don't need to listen to episode 1, well, I'm afraid that's not quite right, because episode 1 is important and it doesn't take that much time to go back and listen to it, because that will put a person in a much more informed position to be able to proceed with clarity. But one of the things that stands out above all is the sentiment of the questioner revolving around a demand upon the devil.
I demand that you give me direct and truthful answers. Are you ready for the interview, Mr. Devil?
Now realize, if the devil is the lowest resonance, lowest quality of connection, of character and station, the epitome of extreme and arrested behavior, this is what the devil represents. Whether or not it's going to be confirmed as we continue is another story, but let it be said, in terms of this work, that is what the devil is, the epitome of contradiction, the type of contradiction that causes a person to be born into the most pristine circumstances and then not value their life. This is extreme contradiction, but this again is the work of the proverbial devil. But know that it's really to do with the green power of the soul ultimately, and this conception within oneself of a fragmented contradiction taken as reality. This is lunacy. This is absolute lunacy, and the reason why it's lunacy is because a psychology of such a nature, like the moon, reflects the light, needs the attention of others, needs an external energy to be able to reflect it, not being in a position to create its own light. And then, as a result of only being able to reflect what shines towards it, conceals a cold, dark antithesis that is actually closer to what the process of the moon really is than the illusion of the emittance of light. Because the moon does not emit light. There is no such thing as moonlight. It's an actual contradiction, because the moon cannot generate light. Now, some people in their ignorance will go so far as to speak of children being moon children. And when you look at the type of people that make these references, you'll find that there's a very strong connection to what is being presented here as the devil. It's a type of thinking, a very low type of thinking. But imagine those that refer to the moon as Mother Moon. This is the type of contradiction that is painful to pursue. It's an absolute nightmare to actually refer with adoration to the moon as mother. For the only type of psychology that would suggest that the moon is Mother Moon is one that's seeking to be born there. But then that's another story. So to continue then, this demand upon the devil is very important, ultimately extraordinarily significant, because it is something that appears at the level of amber. In that sense, the person has come to a personal stand in themselves and then turned around, and having come to this stance in themselves, this pristine position in themselves, then imposes whatever connections they have won back on what they've actually emerged out from, so that they can dominate it, so that they can govern it, and so that they can impose their order upon it. Now let's say that again. When a person accidentally, deliberately, through shock, through warp, through desire, through lust, through education, through refinement, through development, reaches the level of amber, that is to say, I am, the fifth level within the spectrum or domains of experience, if their attitude causes them to yield to something greater than themselves and becoming ensconced in the way and the style of the fourth domain, the ruby domain, the warmth of being genuine, sincere, and being in service to something higher than oneself, that is oneself. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? To be in a position of feeling lonely, but knowing one is never alone, and that the loneliness comes as a result of one's attitude and what one has had to sacrifice in order to sustain the maintenance of such an attitude. This is a whole different set of considerations for some people, but for those that would valiant be, they know exactly what is being spoken about here. To feel terribly lonely at times, but know that one is never really alone. And such is an experience that it will not be exchanged for anything. But isn't this then a great clue between the high and the low? For in the high, they seek quality and not quantity. And therefore, if it means to be alone, whilst being ensconced in something that comforts one to such a degree that they can feel lonely and yet know that this is merely a confirmation of the impending regal nature of their life. But then on the other hand, you see there are those that reflect the light, having got to a considerably high stage for whatever reason, and because the attitudes are cultural, because the lifestyle is cultural, because the resonance is cultural, because the connections are cultural, because power, profit and promotion is the order of the day, that life then demands to be dominant, demands to have power, and demands to order everything that is beneath it, or puts itself beneath it, or yields to it. And thus, because nothing stays the same, the direction upon which such a life embarks may begin quite high in the amber of one's life, but ends in the sediment, the end time sediment of their life, fixed, arrested, full of intentions, but never realizing anything more than the satisfaction of themselves. This is rather a first base description of what it is to make demands upon the devil, seeing that the devil is the lowest order of the mind, the carnal mind, and the lowest order of the carnal mind, the lustful mind, the physical mind, the do what thou wilt mind. No matter how the presentation may be, no matter how shiny it may be, realize the moon has no light. It may have much external adornment, many numbers of people who bathe within the reflection of their own light. But see that what they invest in is but a parasite upon the body corporate. And if it were not for the people, the energy that it is receiving, the question is, would it be able to continue doing what it does? If it has no light, that is. So to demand, don't miss it. When a person is in a position to be conscious enough to have the means and ways to make demand upon the lowest levels of the occult, it's not because they're stupid. It's not because they're not bright people, but they've chosen to use this brightness to be in a position to magnetically control others, simply because they can, and they will do whatever it is that they will. Demand.
I demand that you give me direct and truthful answers. Are you ready for the interview, Mr. Devil?
Conversely, seldom, if ever, will a righteous woman or righteous man make demand upon life. They may make demand upon themselves to refine and to develop and change and come into simile with the finer parts of themselves. Never will a life that is serious about embodying the essential qualities and natures and rubatize themselves. The person seeking to do that, then they know demand doesn't come into it, and certainly not demand upon that which is lower than the standards set by creation and by the planet. To strive to connect to something higher than oneself as a way and a means of going on in life. So moving on then, we then hear an answer from the devil in the following fashion. Now, it's rather interesting, isn't it? Because you see, for those people that can hold more than one thing in their mind, they're going to realize that this is a critical point in the engagement. Well, that's not actually quite true, because the minute a person starts contemplating about demanding things from the lower occult, and realize the lower occult is to do with the physical manifestation of life, 7, 6 and 5, the carnal mind, the mind of polarity, to win and to lose, to have and to hold, to give and to take, to donate and to receive. This is all to do with the carnal worlds, the physical worlds. And the answer that this entity living in the lowest part of the person's mind is an answer that is not only an answer, but it's also a critical point in the engagement. It's a reversal of polarity. And this is what's been spoken about before, about how the perception can quite easily be misled or inveigled into thinking the moon has an integral light to it, when it's actually the reflection from something high. When the so-called devil suggests,
"Yes, I am. But you must address me with more respect. During this interview, you will address me as Your Majesty."
By what right do you demand such royal respect?
You should know I control 98% of the people of your world. Do you not think that entitles me to rate as royalty?
see that if the person agrees to refer to the devil as Majesty, well, then they seal their fate, and they have become connected to something so low that their mind didn't need to be there, number one, and number two, they've inveigled themselves, they've instructed the life essence of themselves to construct an attitude in which the lowest levels of their mind has now been perceived as being the highest, because that's the only way that a person can actually agree to refer to something ultimately degenerate or evil in terms of Your Majesty. Your Majesty, then, is not an arbitrary term. Your Majesty is talking about the coronation of enlightenment. That is to say, the flaring of the spirit and the igniting of the mind, so that the nebulous process of higher emotion, higher sexuality gives rise to creation. This is what is meant by majesty, the coronation of a life that is arbitrarily referred to as queen or king, revolves around the spirit flare caused in a person by being ignited by the finger of God itself. Imagine a person has a wick at the top of their head, and suddenly they remain still enough, stay in one place for long enough for the finger of God to touch them, and suddenly they become a living fire. That's majesty. That's majesty. But when a person then goes the other way, they don't wait. The attitude and the type of psychology at play does not have the patience to stand still. For truth cannot be fetched. It comes when one makes demand of it. No, they don't have the patience for that. So they, rather than wait for the finger of God to touch a filament of their mind and start their mind, they seek to start the mind of others for the purposes of power, profit and promotion, wherein ultimately one must understand they become the government, the order and the dominion of those that they see to be beneath them. This is the real way of looking at the difference between he and she that profess I am, as opposed to he or she that professes its name to be I am that I am. Because one is that domain of amber, where all one has brought together is oneself, and one is proclaimed at the level of opal, where one knows that one is participant and witness the God of the Creator, the absolute cause at the first domain. Now do realize that time is being taken here to establish a fine enough prophylactic upon the mind so that one's diagnostic ability is honed to a point where one does not become inveigled, but one can see how inveiglement occurs, because this will only be useful to those that can think in an abstract way. It's not speaking about the physical realms of life. So yes, might come as a bit surprise to some people that blasphemy abounds as people refer to themselves as kings and queens, and have done so throughout history, where in actual fact there have only been one or two kings that have graced this planet, and one of them was the archetype Jesus the Christ. Another one was the archetype Moses, and another one was the archetype Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon his soul. These three kings are quite real, and if all roads lead to Rome, then all kings lead to the kingdom. All three kings lead to the kingdom. For that matter, the kingdom then leads to all three kings. But remember, this is not for everyone, so if you see yourself tapping out, then that's because it's not for you. It's not for you. But for those who would valiant be, see that the mistake is made very early on. For the life not only demands something from the lowest abyss of the mind, but then when that something in the abyss responds, the first condition upon connection, condition of engagement, is that the questioner becomes subservient to the lowest part of their own mind by way of the recognition in the word majesty.
But you must address me with more respect. During this interview, you will address me as Your Majesty.
By what right do you demand such royal respect?
And once again, Just in case a person may have not caught it the first time, there are different levels of engagement that human life can experience, ranging from terms of an animal, such as a dog or a bitch or a cougar or a pig, a rat, foxy, a worm, a butterfly, a lion. These are all terms that are often attributed or tethered to various types of personality, either in a fond way or in an accurate way, because of the type of behavior that the life displays. But the point is this: it's the lowest expression of human life, and it corresponds to the type of contradiction that appears at 7th, 6th and 5th levels because of the pursuit of power, profit and promotion, and the adornment of pleasure in one way or another. This is what produces these types of animal states of mind in the human being, and it's no coincidence that the so-called devil is referred to as a goat. But be that as it may, remember, this is not for everyone, okay? So there's no need to antagonize oneself by listening any further, because it's quite all right to tap out and go about one's life, because this is not for everyone. The fact of the matter is, with each episode, a person is going to see clearer and clearer, with increasing clarity, what they are, what they can be, and what they're dealing with in others, because of the mental prophylactic that they have put in place, because they care about their life. So the very first mistake the questioner makes, or could make, because we're not sure if what they're going to do is actually acquiesce to this demand, but let's identify how dangerous a demand it is and see that it is happening in the world all the time. People are addressing or engaging with the lowest of the low, and simply because that low thing demands that it be recognized in some way that is a contradiction in terms, because something high is not found in the lowest of the low, and something high does not respond to demands from something low. This is another thing that must be understood. If a person's serious about going about their life in a regenerative way, know that you can never demand to cause something higher than oneself to do business with you, to live with you, to abide with you. It's never going to happen. The high cannot be forced. It's unyielding. It will not yield. The person has to yield to it because it's higher. It's a fundamentally important thing to see how this trick, this subterfuge, this snake oil salesman routine is taking place in the world all the time, because people get confused. It's very easy to get confused by titles, especially if this title is self-imposed and then imposed upon others, but it has some meaning. Your Majesty has a very strong print in the astral light, and should a person be in a position to force others to refer to them as Your Majesty, well, look, there's a massive power in the astral light that a person will immediately connect to, and before they know it, they will be magnetized into believing that this low thing actually is majestic, when it's not. The power of majesty comes from the person that this majestic parasite is sucking its energy out of. But it came about because they made demand upon something beneath their station. This must be remembered. It must be remembered. It's happening all the time. This is how the cultural world actually works. It presents low things as being high, and inveigles the mind to not be in a position to know the difference. So there is a an imbalance of investment when high spirituality is exchanged for low carnality. The biggest con in the world, in the history of the world. And the questioner goes on to ask this.
By what right do you demand such royal respect?
Now let's hear that again.
By what right do you demand such royal respect?
Now we're bringing in the word respect. Respect. Not to spec, not to look, but to respect. Notice the question is quite succinct. They're quite exact about what it is that draws their attention. For the question asks,
by what right do you demand such royal respect?
By what right do you demand? You see, now it's a demand coming the other way. The first demand upon the devil came from the station of amber down into the peridot, or from the domain of the fifth domain down into the seventh domain, but in the astral light.
I have uncovered the secret code by which I can pick up your thoughts. I have come to ask you some very plain questions. I demand that you give me direct and truthful answers.
This is in the astral light. There are things living in the lowest levels of the astral light that are well aware of the vast histrionic of human life. They came from, these entities actually originated from the level of the sun. So they may appear to be quite wise and knowledgeable, but this is simply a recant of something any human being can be privy to if they're willing to do the work. What is being revealed in these lowest levels of the occult is only valuable to people because they've lost their way and they're seeking the low rather than the high. It's going to come at a cost. And the first indication of this cost is in a very subtle demand that it seems on the surface to be insignificant and arbitrary.
But you must address me with more respect. During this interview, you will address me as Your Majesty.
But there is an actual demand now, moving from the devil saying, you must address me with more respect. Now, the questioner is picking up on the fact that this is an actual demand.
By what right do you demand such royal respect?
If ever someone wonders about the term the hunter being captured by the game, well then this is it. Happens right at the very beginning. The demand upon the questioner to view, to relate, to perceive and conceive this engagement as if it were taking place in the highest parts of their mind, when in actual fact it's taking place in the abject lowest part of their mind. And it should be added, this is a perverse and degenerate engagement. Why? Because the human being is not designed to lower its mind into these realms. It's the same way that a human being is not designed to pick up fecal matter and eat it. It's exactly the same thing. The blueprint of the human being is not designed to go into a reservoir full of rancid water and drink it, because this water resides at the lowest level and quality of the engagement of water in terms of the need of the complex to drink water. There's a standard that the complex is designed to uphold, and the responsibility of the human to support that standard, which revolves around a high enough level of water entering into the complex so that this water can sustain the maintenance of the complex itself. This goes the same for air, it goes the same for physical food, and it goes the same for one's thoughts, one's perceptions, one's aspirations, and dare one say one's demands. But what we find here is a demand appearing in the mind of the questioner, suggesting to the questioner that they have to respect the lowest frequency, the lowest domain the antithesis of what the mind could be working its way towards, and to consider this connection to be royal.
But you must address me with more respect. During this interview, you will address me as Your Majesty.
By what right do you demand such royal respect?
So when the question asks, by what right? The answer that the lowest level, the most degenerate, the most expendable part of the mind offers up by way of rationalization is the following.
You should know I control 98% of the people of your world. Do you not think that entitles me to rate as royalty?
Now this confirms what appeared to be a series of unconnected points for the astute and the prehensile of mind can now pull everything together and see the answer given by the person's mind that's been split into questioner and answer. The answer given makes it very clear, abundantly clear, that what has been presented by way of premise is now being confirmed just in this response. For does not the so-called archetypical devilish mind of the questioner suggest that the questioner should know that this part of the mind, this part of a person's mind, controls 98% of the people in the world. And goes on to say,
do you not think that entitles me to rate as royalty?
Do you not think that entitles me, the devil, to rate as royalty? Now, we don't know what the response is going to be right now, but if it's yes, well, inquiring minds around the world, the present company, are going to have some time to come to a position, take a position on what that actually says, given the fact this drama is taking place within the mind. And dare it be said, in one shape or form, it's taken place in many, many people in the world, perhaps even oneself. Until next time, this is Opal Frequencies with another episode of Department S, and don't be alarmed, that's just the phone. And perhaps that says it all. Until next time.
Keep on rocking and swing. For love is all I bring us. I would really give for you. but baby come to give me some. Baby with the love you gotta let it shine bright. So when you take a bite, then brother when it comes to love and I'm alright. You gonna squeeze me right in the middle of the night. That is how I sing my song.
It's not easy, the woman is not loving God. Is she sweet to live that I get enough? Just one touch of her. You know it is so much. It's like thunder, lightning. The way your love is frightening. I better knock on the wood. Think I better knock on the wood. Think I better knock on the wood. I think I better knock on the wood. I think I better knock
Love is all I give for you.
on the wood.
Wow, when love is all I bring. Keep on rocking and swing. Keep on rocking and swing. For love is all I bring, as I would really give for you. Cause when it comes to love and alright, babies, I will say. Alright, what you say. Let me tell you about no song and down the song. Wow, baby, got to let me be your baby. I never you be. Love, as I would say. Love me tender, love me true, and I would never make you blue, 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 blue. If our love is all I bring, us I would really give for you.
Wake up out of your slumber. This is the tight one.